Welcome to the American Yoga Re-Evolution. My name is John Hayden. I'm a member of the Iyengar Yoga Association of Northern California. I'm going to use the acronym IYANC. Before I introduced our esteemed guests and moderator, I'd like to offer a few words of thanks to the leadership and staff members of the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco. Our organization, IYANC, is honored to be able to partner with such a vibrant and professional organization. I'd like to ask Jennifer Morris to stand up and take a quick bow so that I might acknowledge all the hard work and great planning that went into this event. Jennifer, thank you. And I know that what Jennifer would say is that it was the staff here, it was the stage staff, it was the box office staff, it was the AV staff who did all the heavy lifting. I want to thank you all for making this evening a success. Many of you are aware that our Guruji, Mr. BKS Iyengar, passed away last August. For those of you who have experienced a relationship with someone who is more than just a mentor or a teacher, someone who is in fact a guiding light in your life, you will understand the significance of such a passing. This evening, we are honored to have two of Guruji's longtime students, two of the most senior Iyengar yoga teachers in the world, join us for a conversation about the evolution and the re-evolution of American yoga. Patricia Walden has been a prominent figure in the evolution of yoga in the United States. Patricia holds one of only two advanced senior certificates granted worldwide by BKS Iyengar. Patricia has played an active role in the Iyengar yoga community since the mid-1980s. She came to yoga in her early 20s as a spiritual calling. In 1976, she met BKS Iyengar and was immediately struck by his light, energy, insight, and genius, as well as by his joy in yoga and his delightful humor. Since 1977, Patricia has traveled to India almost 40 times to study with the Iyengar family. Manuso Manos is one of the most capable and experienced of the senior Iyengar yoga teachers. He also holds one of only two advanced senior certificates granted worldwide by BKS Iyengar. He began his studies with Guruji in 1976 and served as chairperson of the first International Iyengar Yoga Convention in 1984. After numerous trips to Pune, India, and nearly 4 decades of personal practice, his understanding of and insights into Iyengar yoga are conveyed with authenticity and precision. We're honored to have Monica Desai Henderson as our moderator for this evening. Monica is an esteemed member of both the IYANC and JCC-SF communities. A certified Iyengar yoga teacher, devoted wife, mother, and active community member, Monica brings insight and understanding to our conversation this evening. Please welcome Patricia Walden, Manuso Manos, Monica Desai Henderson.
Thank you, John, for those kind words. I am honored to be the moderator tonight for our distinguished guests. We really are fortunate to have two luminaries from the world of Iyengar Yoga grace our stage. As John mentioned before, both Patricia and Manuso have been disciples of BKS Iyengar for almost 40 years and have much to say about our topic tonight. They helped to forge what we know of as American Yoga, annually making the pilgrimage to Pune and bringing back the teachings to instruct scores of students and to really evolve and influence and inspire a whole new generation of American yoga practitioners. And to quote BKS Iyengar, and this is kind of a semi-quote, he says, "I am proud of all of them who in the early days made yoga a household subject in all of America." And Patricia and Manuso continue to shape the evolution of yoga moving forward. And I know they have a lot to say about this topic tonight, about American yoga and where it's headed. We have 1 hour, or maybe a little less now. So we will not have the usual Q&A following our talk, but please do join us in the atrium for refreshments where you can visit with our guests. So let's begin. And excuse me while I have my little notes. This is not a professional job I do. So many in the audience are meeting you for the first time. And I think what would be great is for you to describe the story of how you came to yoga. And Patricia, would you launch our conversation?
Sure. So like a lot of people from my generation, we went to San Francisco in the 60s, late 60s, some of us to take drugs and get high and experience LSD, and then some of us thought that if we went to San Francisco and found the right teacher, we would reach enlightenment. I tried drugs, I didn't reach enlightenment, so I decided I would try yoga, which I did in San Francisco and didn't reach enlightenment either. So shortly after that, I went back to Boston, where I'm from, and began to study yoga there, but not Iyengar yoga. That wasn't happening in Cambridge in those days. But I was pulled to yoga, but I wouldn't say that I had a burning desire. I hadn't met that teacher, but I felt that it was really, really important for me.
And Manuso, what's your story?
I'm still trying to figure out who that guy is that they introduced earlier. I'd like to meet him. The old yogis were actually spent a great deal of time disguising who they were and where they came from, because they realized that their story really wasn't important. Who they had been was not as important as what they represented and were trying to describe to people. And it's not that I'm unwilling to tell the story. I started yoga because I had back problems. I went to see absolutely everybody that I possibly could to try to make my back better. Nothing worked. I picked up a yoga book. I started feeling better immediately. It was almost frightening. It was not Iyengar's book. But the transition brought me and started to morph me, change me into a way that I started to see that there was more to it than just the physical, which I had picked up originally. And by the time I got to Iyengar's book and saw that remarkable thing that we called Light On Yoga, I was hooked. That was where my path brought me.
Well, amazing. And you both really were among the early Western pioneers to take yoga up in such a big way and establish it in this country. And I think you'd agree with me that when anybody comes to yoga, and it just even begins, they realize very early on that yoga is this vast ocean of wisdom. And it is many things simultaneously. And there are many approaches in. You both have, not you guys, I'm sorry. You both have studied yoga for so many years and made it your life's work. I imagine you've come closer to kind kind of getting to the essence of what yoga is all about. And would you give us your definition of yoga? And Manusa, would you like to start?
Not particularly. You described it very well as this kind of all-encompassing kind of look. And if you take the old definition that yoga is the vehicle that brings you to heaven, or you take the one that says that yoga is skillful action, or you take the one that says yoga is when the mind ceases to fluctuate, all of those are true. It has to also do with position, relativity, the audience that one's speaking to. I'm speaking at the JCC. I have a group of people that are probably somewhat yoga practitioners. And so the way I see it today has to do with the perspective that's in front of me. On some days, if someone turns to me and says, yoga is about fixing someone's back, like it did for me, I would say, absolutely. And if the next person turns to me and says, I'm only seeking enlightenment, which was what Patricia's path was, I would say, absolutely, you are correct. So again, it has to do with my personal feelings at that moment and what's going on. What do I think yoga is? I think it's the part that brings you to more of a state of awakeness. Yeah. I think that the old practitioners and the new practitioners are all interested in trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing at any given time, why we're here, those grand questions that humans have always asked. I think yoga makes a genuine attempt, puts out the possibility of a path that could lead you towards some understanding of who you are. Yeah.
Patricia.
So one of my favorite experiences and one of my favorite definitions is that yoga is a state where nothing is missing. Yoga is a state that is beyond dualities. I have monkey mind. My mind tends to jump and move very fast. So at the end of my yoga practice or halfway into my yoga practice where I reach this state that is beyond dualities, where everything is quiet inside, I treasure that experience. I treasure that experience. And you've mentioned Guruji's passing. Every day I begin my practice with his definition of yoga, which is yoga is the blending together the intelligence of the brain with the intelligence of the heart. So that definition has become kind of a mantra for me right now.
Wonderful. I think yoga is so experiential and so subjective that to hear how people come to it, there are so many different doorways in, and that's the beauty of yoga. It can be approached at any age, at any time. Well, going back in time, yoga, as we know, came from India in the 5th century BCE. And in those days, it was a very individual, meditative, almost esoteric, mostly seated practice. And in fact, the Sanskrit word for seat is asana, which we use for all the postures now. But great yoga masters like T. Krishnamacharya, BKS Iyengar, Pratabi Joyce, they pushed yoga forward and evolved it by adding to the seated postures a great set of more rigorous poses, asanas. They systematized them, they popularized them, they brought yoga to the West, and they taught to the masses. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of that revolution, that change, and how you have experienced it here in America during your yoga career?
Who you want to be first?
Sure.
Where did you get your figure of 5th century BC?
Well,
let me start by telling you I'm going to disagree with it.
Okay, well I think you're right. It probably preceded that by eons, but there is actual documentation at that
yes,
time.
like people suggest that yoga was brought to America at a certain time too, and they try to put a line in the sand. The person looking for a sense of who they are, I think, predates the 5th century BC in any part of the world. The yogis, as we have some sort of codification, starts to come out of Patanjali and etc. But getting to the point of this, yoga itself doesn't change because seekers are always there, because the human condition itself, whether you take the Buddha's understanding, who talked about the suffering of life, or that taking life itself is, in fact, taking on suffering of a certain degree. And we know that he studied yoga, so we can actually document that that's, in fact, part of what we do as well. But understanding that that's the case, we look to see if we can find a way to get some clarity on that, or some way around it, or over top of it, or to even help someone else in the human suffering. The reason why we have these visionaries and luminaries that you described, and they are brilliant, brilliant people, bringing it to the modern world meant that it had to be changed in a way that brought in and filled in the empty spaces. Imagine now, life was very, very hard, and people had to walk miles per day and do heavy physical labor, whether it was picking or running down an animal or gardening or to bring up crops. Every one of those, the essence of doing asana would have been downplayed. But coming into a world where, whether you call it modernization or industrialization, those people were allowing us to wake up and utilize the physical body to bring ourselves to a state of understanding, spiritual, mental, intellectual, and bringing those together. Did the essence of yoga change? No. Did the outlook, perspective of yoga change? Certainly, because we were finding different inroads. When you talk to someone and you start to study the world and the way we look at it, there was a group of people in Nepal and a group of people in China staring at the same mountain that we call Mount Everest. They had different names for it, but they were staring at the same mountain. I think that's what we're always looking for in yoga, and the perspective of the way that we see it and what we do it. We may even change the name of it, but in fact, its essence is not going to change.
Yeah.
And Patricia, do you have anything to add?
Just to acknowledge that Patanjali's yoga has been around for 3,000 years. The Bhagavad Gita has been around for I don't know how many thousands of years, and then the Upanishads. So the names that you mentioned, these teachers teach us these timeless teachings in a way that we can relate to it. So I think, these scriptures are going to continue on for years and years and years to come. How we do asana, what we do in terms of our physical body, who knows? But I think these scriptures will go on for, hundreds of years, because people's problems and issues are more or less the same.
So there is a universal language.
This is
really.
a universal language.
Yes. Well,
and people will be suffering. It's our human condition.
It's our human condition,
yeah.
right. Well, historically in India, the way that a tradition was passed down was through a direct transmission from master to disciple. And in Sanskrit, that's called the Guru Shishya tradition. You both have had the opportunity to study directly at the feet of B.K.S. Iyengar Guruji for so many years. I would like you to tell us a little bit about your modern day Guru Shishya relationship with him. So, Patricia, would you like to start?
Yes, I would. My favorite subject. So I just wanted to give a little background, and feel free to stop me if I go on too long. But I met Guruji in 1977. He was on a tour in the United States, and the last stop on his tour was in Boston. And I wasn't one of the organizers, but it was organized beautifully, and there was a big platform. And we prepared for his visit for 4 months by studying light on yoga, and we went to the back of the book, unfortunately, and just did back bends. We didn't practice standing poses. But so just to share that the excitement that we had in preparing for BKS Iyengar was excitement like I hadn't known before in my life. The day of his, he gave a 5-day workshop, and the first day we all got there early, and we were just so excited, and he was a little bit late coming out, and we were getting more and more excited. And when he finally walked out, the whole room went silent. And he had his hands on his hips. I'm sure you remember, you know that stance. Hands on his hips in his little shorts, and looked around the room. And it seemed like he was looking around the room for 10 minutes. It was probably only a minute. And he said, "You Bostonians, tough coconuts to crack." So I'm not sure why he said that, but it was true. It was absolutely true. But on a personal level, before he said anything, I felt something that I had never felt before in the presence of another human being. My life changed in that 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute period where he came out, and it changed. I mean, it changed. I went to India the following year, and I have been going since then. But his presence filled the room, and the way yoga was taught in those days, and on the East Coast anyway, we'd turn the lights off, make a circle, and I would lead poses, but I would never get up and adjust my students. It was just the way it was done. It was called flow and glow. So when Guruji came down off the platform, we weren't prepared for that, and you know, he has a fierce look, and we were a little bit alarmed. We didn't know what was going to happen. But I just loved the tension that he created in the room, the fact that he went around and slapped people on the back and looked in their eyes and say, "You're not lifting here, you're not doing that." It was so different than anything I had seen before. And I just thought, my life is really going to change now. So, and then just to say, the following year I did go to Pune. And Manusa was there. We were there at the same time. That's where we met each other. The first class, Guruji came up to me and said, "Psychologically, I'm going to break you down." And I wasn't scared. I was glad I was getting attention from him. I would have taken any kind of attention. But and then I decided I'm going to come back here every year forever. I mean, that's how my mind was working. So I did. I came back the next year, the year after, the year after. Did he say anything to me the next year, the year after, the year after, the year after, the year after? No, he didn't speak to me. And every year, I was more determined to get his attention. I would have done anything to get his attention. On year number 8, and my practice really took off, and he taught Shirshasana 2. So I came into Shirshasana 2, and I felt him come behind me. You always know when he's around. You just feel it. And he stood behind me, and he took his foot, and he was kicking my back. And I thought, I'm not coming down. I'm not coming down. And he kept kicking my back, and I thought, I'm not coming down. And I used every ounce of mental and physical strength to stay there. So he gave me one final kick and then walked away and said, "Now you understand." And I said, "Yay!" Yeah. So that was a turning point in my relationship with him and in my own sadhana. So there are many more stories, but I won't go on.
And Munu, so how about your your guru-shishya relationship?
Well, when she started with 76, it's the turning point for me, too. I had studied out of his book for 2.5 years, but I was unable to get into his workshop when he was teaching here in Berkeley.
Oh, my God.
And they gave me an observer spot so I could see, which in some ways I felt I was cheated because I couldn't get in. Other ways, I had a bird's eye view that almost no one else got. So I could sit behind him on the stage and look out at what he was looking at. First pose, Tadasana, people standing there. Second pose, Uddhita Trikonasana, jump your feet apart. There's a woman almost dead center, maybe 10 feet in front of him. She got one arm down and one arm up, just like this. He said, "I told you all, bring your arms out to the side." She says, frozen shoulder. He comes down off the stage, goes down, grabs her, holds one hand on her shoulder, grabs her hand, goes like this. You hear this blood-curdling scream. Her knees start to go out. He grabs her by her ribs, puts her up like this. He says, "Now, keep your arm there." Every pose, he comes down off the stage and adjusts this woman. Every time, it's a little bit less of a scream. By the end of the class, she's got her arms straight up in the air like this. I watched him cure a frozen shoulder that had been there for more than 2 years in a few hours. And the way that it wasn't charisma, because that's the easy word that we spit at each other. But his command of the subject, his belief in the subject, his ability to inspire others into this was breathtaking and beyond belief. Since she mentioned her first class in Pune, I'll mention my first class in Pune, same day, 1977. We get all done, and I had begged him in California to help me with my back, and he said I had to come to Pune. We get done with the first class, 4.5 hours of standing poses. I grab him just as he's leaving. That's not an exaggeration. As he's leaving, I turned to him and I said, I'm the fellow from California, and I told you that I had a back problem, and you told me to come to Pune, and you'd help me. Just almost that fast. And he leans into me, and he whispers, your back pain will be worse than it's ever been, and then it will go away. So imagine now, he did this with these two people in a couple of hours and had that kind of inspiration that he could do across the board. So.
Amazing. You both were so fortunate to have that kind of one-on-one relationship with the Guru. And I have to say that I think your students are very fortunate to have you as teachers, because you are the link. You have that source material at your disposal, which is amazing. We did touch upon this earlier about the universal language of yoga, and how it does change a little bit as it crosses cultures and time, but it also stays the same, meeting people where they are. That's what yoga is supposed to do. Do you think, though, that there is a difference between Indian yoga and American yoga?
I think there's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Because, if I may, because the human condition is the human condition. Now, one's description of how to get out of it is going to change. You look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. He's talking about a furrow and burnt seeds. Well, I'm not much of a farmer. So if I describe it from a TV experience or the way that education was given in my generation, it's just a matter of trying to make a translation that communicates with the individual in front of me. And we all have this experience, whether it's with Gita Iyengar or BKS Iyengar, and he stands in front of a group of people and he begins to describe the word fish plate. She's laughing because she was there. And there's nobody in the room understands what a fish plate, it's something that they use on a railroad, and he's trying to make a description of this. But you see, because it's so far out of my lexicon, there is no way that any of it's going to sink in. Now, is he teaching Indian yoga? No. He's trying to make a communication in terms of words that don't do anything. And then the other one he used at one point was splashboard.
What about deck chair?
Deck chair. Deck chair is those canvas chairs that they put on the deck of a cruise ship. You know, the old ones, they almost never do it anymore. But these were the words. But again, it was just a matter, and then when he realized that everybody around him was looking at him like, we have no idea what you're talking about. It wasn't that it was Indian yoga, and it wasn't that it was American yoga. It was a communication process in ways that people can do. You made the description that because the subject is what it is, you're trying to describe almost a sensation to somebody, and that words will always fall short. And so we tell stories so somebody can try to put themselves into it to get that feeling. Yoga has to be done with that experience, and you have to bring them to that experience, and then once in a while, you have to make a description in a language that they can appreciate and relate to.
Yeah.
So.
I remember when we were in China with Guruji, and he, one of the things that he has often stressed is you have to teach people where they are. And so one of the things that happened in China, students came very dressed up to yoga class, full makeup and, you know, outfits, really beautiful outfits. And Guruji was looking around the first day, and I don't remember if it was the first day or the second day, where he talked about the difference between cosmetic beauty and cosmic beauty.
I like that.
So he is a master of playing on words. Don't settle for cosmetic beauty. Go to cosmic beauty. And then I think it was the second day, he started talking about the different proportions that Asian bodies had, and I was the Western body with long limbs, and then an Asian body with short limbs and long spine. So there are some differences, obviously, and he is very skillful in dealing with them. And I won't say anymore.
Well, good, bad, or indifferent, because of where we are.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be with B.K.S. Iyengar when he taught in Israel, and somebody asked him about Jewish yoga, and he says, no such thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning he was not going to let them draw that cultural difference. It wasn't that he didn't respect the people, the religion, the heritage. None of that was the issue. It's just he was not going to allow for that severe demarcation or separation.
Yeah, he's often used the word no divisions. He started that at Estes Park, no divisions.
Well, I love that kind of ecumenical, open-minded approach. And going back to B.K.S. Iyengar, he stated that yoga is a living, breathing art, that it's not static. Excuse me while I look at my notes. He was constantly refining and developing his own postures, which translated into his teachings. And now that he's no longer with us, how do you see Iyengar Yoga maintaining the integrity of its tradition while making the necessary changes to appeal to future yoga practitioners? Either one of you can start.
He was always a seeker. There were all kinds of ways of describing him. And if he inspired anything in us, it was to also be a seeker. Now, if the old books are correct, there are thousands and thousands of poses. T. Krishnamacharya said that he watched his teacher demonstrate 7,000 poses, of which he taught him 700. Whether it's an exaggeration is inconsequential. He's saying that there's a lot of them. We will never know exactly which poses B.K.S. Iyengar invented. And now, the reason I mention this to you is that those of you who practice, if you come up with something, whether anybody ever gave it to you as an asana or not, if you find out that this position, seat, posture, gives you some sense of understanding, enlightenment, relief from pain, then that goes on. The problem that we're going to have is people try to codify it so solidly and place it into stone. I learned this exactly from Iyengar, where he was willing to change that same pose when you would see him the next day, let alone the next year when you came back to see him. So if there's anything we should be doing, it's continuing to push people to keep examining themselves.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing that I noted at Guruji's 95th birthday was, so usually there are different speakers at his birthday celebration, and usually it's the older students, but on this particular birthday, the people that got up and spoke were the younger generation of teachers, of Indian teachers, and he really wanted to see younger teachers beginning to teach the Iyengar method. And I think that's why Gita did the convention that she did. It was for students and teachers that had 3 years of experience, and she really wanted to focus on bringing the younger teachers along. And that just started, I think, about 4 years ago, their emphasis on bringing younger people to the Iyengar method.
Yeah, I think it's I think yoga will always be a draw, but it's just that idea of, I guess the Sanskrit word is parampara, which is that tradition that you, you pass down. And now it's not guru shishya, it's teaching to large groups. And then they in turn, many of them become teachers and teach ever larger, ever widening circles of people. And, I think that the challenge is maintaining the foundation and moving it forward, but not losing sight of where it came from.
Yeah.
You know, because it gets farther and farther away
That
from
we
the source.
can't hold it like this.
Yeah, it's
Not
a
like
fun,
this.
it's a juggling act. It's a push and a pull, I think. Let's see. Okay. We're going faster than I thought.
I'm out of here.
Okay. So this is a question that is a little long-winded. But, you know, when we think of another great Indian leader, Mahatma Gandhi, who said, be the change you want to see in the world. And we think of yoga, I think of yoga as such a very individual practice. Even though I'm practicing with lots of people, I'm like in my own zone. It's what makes me feel like a better person, and hopefully the positive changes that are beginning to develop in me radiate out. But one of the main goals in yoga, as you touched on before, Manuso, is it enables the practitioner to transcend suffering. And you touched on that as well. Our world just seems so full now of, I mean, maybe this has been the case always, but by virtue of population and the fast-paced nature of our lives, the world is so full of turmoil and war and injustice and poverty. How can yoga be a tool to serve those large populations that are facing such crises? And can yoga, as a collective practice, be the movement that brings people together to establish a more peaceful world? That's kind of a big one.
I keep trying to pass it off to her because she called me a few days ago asking that she get to speak.
That is not true. Not one bit.
I'd like to answer it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all yours. You can start.
You talked, let me summarize what you said in the last several sentences. Because you talked at one point about the Guru Sisya and now expanding into major classes, watching Iyengar teach 1,200 people in China, 800 people when he was in Russia. Those kinds of figures were not uncommon with him. But I would suggest to you that the human suffering, the human condition, is in fact exactly what it was 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And whether I feel like I've got a problem because there's a drought in this country, because there's turmoil on the other side, because there's someone trying to destroy the lifestyle that I think might be important, I believe that those things have been reported from individual to individual over many centuries and among the humans all the way across the face of the earth. So when yoga expands from a group of 1 or 2 people and you get 12 disciples, and then you change that over and now there's thousands of people who are classes, mega classes that go 50, 80, 70 people at a time. You understand that message goes out of what yoga is and what it could potentially do for the individual, even if they don't have to have someone sitting with them lecturing them or talking to them about the minutia of their day like the old guru might have. The ability for this to be morphed into this society, you know, yoga was brought kicking and screaming into this century. And now the new avenues that are being explored on television with Lilius all those years ago and the new generation with trying to figure out how to, you know, the internet. I'm not even talking about a commercial business or business. I'm talking about people genuinely trying to help other people through this path, through this very difficult thing that we call living. I suggest to you is exactly the same as it's always been. And it's not going to work for everybody because it calls on everyone to have a drastic understanding of how falling into the regular patterns that happen to human beings can in some ways keep you in that suffering. And that changing your outlook, perspective on the universe, which is what yoga was always about, could in fact give you some sense of this harmony, this possibility of harmony.
That's good. Yeah, it's I guess I was thinking on that level of world. You know, they say that, you know, the wings of a butterfly effect, you know, can be felt halfway around the world. And so I do suppose that all of us who do practice yoga in whatever form, at whatever level, does create some kind of change, whether conscious or unconscious. You
I
know,
think
that it just
definitely-
radiates out.
It has a rippling
Yeah.
effect.
I think that, unfortunately, that thinking is a person thinking or considering themselves separated from the universe rather than part of it. When I get even slightly better, I'm egotistical enough to think that the entire universe gets better. Mm-hmm. When I get a little more peaceful, the people around me start to get a little more peaceful. When I get more angry, more hostile, then the universe itself turns up. Mm-hmm. So if there's a lot of people starting to do yoga, they may start by getting hostile, but maybe in the long run, the universe will be changing because we're all...
By example.
Right.
Not just
right.
example, no, even in the fabric of what it's like to be human. All of us together. Yeah.
Great. So, what are the biggest myths about yoga in today's modern world that you would like to demystify?
I'm not really interested in that question.
Okay. I like your honesty.
Well,
Manisa?
what do you want to talk about? 8-hour orgasms? Do you want to talk about...
Oh,
you've not heard this myth, right? I'm the only one that heard this.
No.
I don't think I debunked that at that moment, but what goes on is yoga gets changed when it came to the commercial world, because it really was separated from that until the 20th century sometime. When it started to become a multi-billion-dollar business, it's going to change, and there are always going to be charlatans. Yeah. That's never going to change. And it's not that people shouldn't make money at it, but the moment that you start to do that, then everyone's got their own kind of way to hook the next person in. Mm-hmm. And it's not that some of them are really quite viable, but suggesting to somebody that when you really start to go to the outer limits of what it is, of somebody reaching so far as, giving out beer at the end of their yoga class, or
yoga,
it's happening.
Yoga and chocolate.
Chocolate now I can relate to. See, chocolate is a mystical experience. But those are the things, where it gets a bad name in many, many ways. And that's what, if we're going to debunk anything, that would be it. At some point, it should still be about getting yourself to an understanding of who you are.
Yeah. Right. Let's see, I think I've gone through all of my questions.
There was one that you didn't ask.
Yeah.
And I think Minuso and I would both like to.
Oh, okay. What was
answer.
that question?
So I think it was the last.
I'm glad you remembered.
And the
oh, yeah,
origin-
that question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the best
So-
question of all.
Yeah.
Hold on. Wait.
I wish I had read the
one
questions.
that I'm really interested in.
Okay, here we go. Now take your time on answering this one. So, looking back at where you were when you first started this awesome path of yoga and taking stock of where you are now, what have been the greatest lessons learned or discoveries made that inform your life?
Well, I wanted to just talk a little bit about what it was like to be taught by B.K.S. Iyengar on a fairly regular basis when I went to Pune. And one of the things that I learned early on in working with him is that I had to learn how to surrender completely in order to be taught by him. And he would never use the word surrender. He had never used that word. It was kind of an unspoken thing. When he would adjust me, I had to be physically strong and stable and mentally strong and stable, but at the same time, absolutely receptive to whatever it was that he was asking me to do physically. And learning to surrender for me was not something that you just say, oh, I'm going to surrender. It was probably a 10-year process, and I learned a tremendous amount in this process of learning to surrender. And I feel, of course, my practice got better because of it, but even deeper than that, I felt that surrendering to Guruji in some way was learning to surrender to myself. I felt that my heart opened deeply in his presence, and on rare occasions, I actually felt the presence of God when he would adjust me or when he taught me. And those memories will always stay with me. They're very precious memories, and I think he gave me the gift of surrender, the art of surrender, and it really had a rippling effect throughout all aspects of my life. So I wanted to share that, because that's I think that's part of what it is to have a guru, that you surrender to this being. And the other thing I wanted to say is, for me, what his legacy is for me. Geeta Iyengar and Guru Purnima gave a talk about Guruji, of course, and she began the talk by saying, when Guruji was young, he practiced. When he was poor, he practiced. When he was rich, he practiced. When he was injured, he practiced. When he was tired, he practiced. So what she's saying is, no matter what, Guruji practiced. He practiced, from the age of 16, 17 until a day before he died. And that, to have that living example of what practice can do for one's being and how it has a rippling effect, how fortunate Manuso and I have been, and all of you who've been in his presence and have seen that even someone like Guruji transformed. He was B.K.S. Iyengar when he first met him, but he became Guruji. And as he transformed, I feel he took us along with his transformation. So, and I feel that his life was about practice and devotion to God. That's how I see it. I mean, it was much more than that, but those are two of the things that I think of now when I look at Guruji's life and what he has done with it.
Wow, those are beautiful gems
Thank you.
to sustain a life. And Manuso, what would you?
Is this my turn to say I'm not interested in the question?
No. Do you want
No,
me-
I'm tremendously interested in the question, but it's a fascinating thing, again, with perspective and outlook. The thing about being close to B.K.S. Iyengar, and many of us were quite lucky to do that, is we were all treated as individuals. And his individual treatment of Patricia was drastically different than mine, and mine different than hers. Mm-hmm. And both of us could report different times that he seemed to be really quite harsh and et cetera. But he actually was willing to listen to my particularly stupid questions and
From day one.
from my queries.
Day one.
She tells that story privately, and I'll tell the one that she tells, and that is there were very few of us in the first intensive that we did together. And he would get done with showing something. He'd say, "Now do you understand?" And I would go, "Nope."
In a very loud voice.
That's me. And he would say, "Okay," he'd start describing it again. You see the difference between that and someone that felt like he was trying to break her, or he was trying to change her or make her surrender? He was doing something quite different with me. Mm-hmm. In other words, it wasn't like, "You idiot, just listen to what I'm telling you." He didn't go there. He never did those words with her. But he was looking at the individual. The problem with describing Iyengar is that it ends up sounding just like guru worship, that you have been morphed into some sort of a cult, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. The thing that it looks at, and people would start to describe him, and they'd say he was born to this life, and that unfortunately, short sells him so badly. Because as Patricia so eloquently described Gita's words, the reason why he could have effect on people's lives is he took the time to examine who he was, and knowing who he was, he could translate that in a way to find out who the person was in front of him and help them along on their path. His movement towards becoming a guru has all kinds of portions of history. He never let anybody call him a guru until his guru was already dead. He was disquieted by it, and I think that puts it mildly. But what he tried to do is eventually he had to wear that mantle because we kept putting it on him. Going onward with that, every one of his senior teachers has slightly different qualities. And when it came to the way he would describe what to do or what the job was that Patricia would do, he didn't expect the same thing out of me, and he didn't expect the same thing out of her, but he wanted us to take what we brought to the table and bring it out to its full essence. Because he was not a realized human being in the way that people think that he could never make mistakes. Don't hear that from me. But imagine a human being fighting to find his way into the highest potential that he had, and ask the people around them that it might be worth their while to consider doing exactly the same thing. And to do that repeatedly, and to do it publicly with his hands on his hips as she described, and to insist upon them that as far as they had gotten was fantastic, and now move on. Go further. Go tell someone else. Describe to them that there is a human potential that can be brought out in each individual. And he didn't really vary from that in any conversation I ever had with him. He would tell me about how bad things were, here, or how he sympathized, empathized with me, and he says, now, let's go to work. Because that's all there was. And then he asked senior teachers, now, don't go back and teach like me. Go out and figure out how to teach those people in front of you.
And that's, in a way, moving it forward and
Yeah.
addressing
Yes.
the future generations as they need to be met. And that's the beauty of that teaching. Well, what a wonderful evening we have had tonight. I want to thank Patricia and Manuso for their time, their generosity. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can
Stand up.
see you.
Stand up, Manuso, stand up.
Thank you. Thank you.